Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to talk about the offense from that game Sunday against the Colts. But first of all, a couple of big breaking stories in Baltimore sports we need to handle first. Joining me tonight is Gabe Ferguson of the Situation Room. Gabe, how you doing?
Hey Ken, good to join you. It's always a good time to talk football with you on Film Study.
Appreciate it. Make sure you check out Gabe and Jordan Coe's show that is comes out on Sunday night, and then you guys have another show on Thursday as well.
Yeah, that's correct. We're trying to do a little bit different format this year, where we want to hit you with immediate reactions to the game right after on Sunday or whenever the game might be, and then come back and kind of revisit our initial reactions and give it a little bit more context after some film study, and then maybe a little bit of a preview for the coming game as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, of course, the biggest news in Baltimore sports today was the death of Brooks Robinson. Always sad to lose a great one, a life extremely well lived. He'll be remembered and celebrated, obviously, here for as long as Baltimore sports exists. But Gabe, did you ever get to see Brooks play, even on video or after the fact?
I mean, I never saw him play live. I'm a little too young for that, but I definitely saw clips of him, being the human vacuum cleaner out there at third base. Just a whole career full of highlight plays. Definitely a beloved sports figure in Baltimore. Someone who was just a legend growing up as an Orioles fan. Someone that was always there as one of the all-time greats that we had the fortune to watch as Baltimore sports fans.
Very fortunate indeed. And Brooks was my hero growing up. And in 1971 is when I really became a baseball fan. Of course, the Orioles had just won the World Series with Brooks Robinson having a huge series and postseason in its entirety. Kind of forgot he was 7 for 12 against the Twins in that ALCS, but they reminded us of that on the broadcast, as Palmer has a terrific memory for everything, but particularly for that. And that was great to see Brooks, even in those declining years, still playing well and being an important player. But my best memories of Brooks are probably in his post-career days. And I would go to the Golden Arm ceremony each year. And for the top college quarterback, it's given away by the Unitas family, and Transamerica was always a sponsor of it for many years anyway. And I would go there, and Brooks was there every year, of course, and many of the old Colts were as well. The Colts from the 1950s, we started to lose them one after the other. They were replaced kind of by the Colts of the 70s. But Brooks was always there. And the one great thing is he always had time for a conversation with you. And it didn't matter, 10, 15 minutes, personal stuff. I usually asked him about, who he was voting for in the Hall of Fame. He had great interest. I really cared about trying to get Ron Santo into the Hall of Fame for a long time. So he always kind of had that side. You had health issues to talk about. That was fine too. And it turns out Brooks remembered my brother, who was working in hotel management as kind of a side gig in Cooperstown, and had been at there's a hotel there where all the players stay called the Otis Saga, and he's at the front desk there, and he goes, "Oh, Victor is your brother," and so it was really surprising that he remembered him. But my brother had the same feeling that Brooks was always the kindest, sweetest guy, and the most difficult character was Reggie Jackson. So it was, the other side of the coin. But Brooks, just a pure class act, wonderful person. And if you never met him personally, I kind of feel sorry for you in that you've missed something important. I know everyone's telling you how sweet and genuine he was, and that's absolutely right on the money. The guy could not have been a more friendly human being.
Yeah, it's a real sad day for Baltimore sports, for professional baseball, for city of Baltimore in general. And I'm sure he's always going to be remembered and always be someone that is going to be just that figure of greatness in the city of Baltimore. So it's I'm sad that I didn't get to have one of those personal stories, but it sounds like you really had a really unique ability to kind of meet with and talk to someone of his stature so many times. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, that's a great event, by the way. The Golden Arm event. If you get to go ever, I think they're still doing it. I'm 99% sure. I just don't know who's sponsoring it at this point. But it's a fantastic event if you had the opportunity to get tickets to that. Uh, the other big news we ought to mention today too, before we get into the offense, is the Ravens making a move at outside linebacker and signing Kyle Van Noy, who was in. For a workout, for a visit. I'm not sure which it was during the preseason. And it did not come to fruition, even though the Ravens were in dire need of a Sam linebacker at that point. That need remains, and I guess has been accentuated by other losses.
Yeah, I think it's a really good fit for the Ravens in terms of what Kyle Van Noy's skill set is. You mentioned specifically the Sam linebacker position. That's kind of the role that Tyus Bowser has vacated while he's on the PUP list, and the Ravens didn't really have a kind of a 1-for-1 replacement for him on the roster. So someone like Van Noy is actually probably a better option than anybody they had going into the season. So I think it's a great fit. Obviously, it's at one point it might have been a financial reasons. They didn't have the cap room, or they wanted to maybe get someone who was more of like an edge rusher, and they landed with Clowney, who I think has been a really good addition to the team as well. So being able to have both of them come in and contribute this year, I think is going to be really important as the outside linebacker position has been hit hard by some of these injuries, and it's a position that is obviously important for any roster, but the Ravens really need those guys who can not only be versatile in terms of their pass rush, but also coverage and ability to set the edge.
Yeah, very much so. And in particular, the drop into coverage with Bowser done about 32% of snaps in his entire career is enormously important for the Ravens pass rush flexibility. And we saw, in fact, Clowney dropped a coverage. We saw plays where Michael Pierce and Justin Madubuike on the same play twice dropped a coverage in this game. So multiple games with simulated pressure being played, but having a Bowser or a Van Noy available to do that kind of duty on the edge is extremely valuable. And you come into a season with Owe, Ajabo, and who am I forgetting? Owe, Ajabo, and Bowser being the three guys you're going to really look for to take the lion's share of the defensive snaps, of the outside linebacker snaps. And now it looks like it's Clowney, Van Noy, and Moon, or whoever else is out there this week, Harrison, Tavius Robinson. It is a completely revamped room, obviously, from what they expected it to be, even after the first preseason game.
Yeah, and fortunately, the Ravens had a little bit of depth there in terms of some of the practice squad bodies, and Tavius Robinson, who as a rookie didn't really know what to expect from him. He hasn't been a complete disaster. He's kind of played solid, not exceptional out there as kind of like a need to have some body to throw out there. Same thing with Jeremiah Moon. I think having someone like Van Noy will actually give a little bit more juice potentially to the defense in total. And I think we don't know how long it's going to be for Owe and potentially Ajabo before they can get back. Hopefully Bowser will be ready to go as soon as his stay on the PUP is over. But those reinforcements could be a couple weeks away. So getting an additional veteran body out there, it's a big move for a team that's had so many injuries up and down the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to that one. Hope it works out. The new injuries this week, of course, Ajabo, after only 4 snaps out. I think that's got to be part of what's precipitated this. I am concerned about what it might mean in terms of how serious Ajabo's injury is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Harbaugh has given much detail about it. It makes sense to be concerned about that position. The immediate addition of a player at that position, I think that might mean something. But it could also mean that they just need the depth there. I mean, we already saw some players getting significant snaps that, like you said, the Ravens probably weren't expecting to have to play so much at the beginning of the season. So maybe it's just the right time. He's no longer at the same price tag as he was in the offseason. So it just makes sense for the roster in this specific moment.
Yeah, I absolutely, I agree with that. So we don't really know. We can't project that onto it. I'm just naturally concerned. You're right. In addition, Ajabo Bateman has some sort of a hamstring problem. They haven't, as far as I know, to this moment, they have not put him on IR. I did not see additional IR moves later this afternoon. Wallace went on IR yesterday, I believe. So he's there already. Edwards concussion protocol. I have no new news about that. And of course, Wallace already went to IR. The roster crunch can't be ignored now in terms of how they move people around. They had all of their 6 inactive spots taken up by walking wounded, effectively starters that were on this team. It's not even really just starters. They're all stars pretty much.
Yeah.
And so it's a very bad situation, obviously, and you're going to add at least 3 players to that group if you don't make any IR moves, which means you have to make IR moves. That's what it means. They have to decide which of these injuries is most serious or which of these players are coming back latest and probably move those guys to IR and make some elevations at this point.
Yeah, and some of those are tricky. Edwards with a concussion protocol. You never know the severity of that. It could be something that he starts practicing later in the week and he's good to go next week. It could be a multi-week injury, depending on how that those the protocol, the tests they're going to perform go. So I doubt that he's somebody who goes on the IR, but it's hard to say for sure. You'd hope that Bateman doesn't go to the IR. As much depth as I think the Ravens had at the beginning of the season at wide receiver. One of them is already down with Wallace. Beckham missed the game. I think the hope is that he might be ready to go next week, but ankle injuries can be tricky. The initial indication that I saw was that Bateman's injury wasn't serious, but you never know. It could, if it's something that could hinder for 2 to 3 weeks. I think the IR might be something you have to do, just because like you said, you can't avoid to take up any more roster spots with all the injuries that have happened.
Right. I sometimes it feels a little distasteful to talk about this, but these injuries are very significant in terms of the cap hit each of them costs. Early season injuries end up eating up cap like nobody's business because you have to put an additional player on your roster and still pay the old one. And the additional guy, even if he makes the vet minimum, is another $1 million gone against the cap, which is essentially 0.4% of your cap you lose for each injury. So extremely costly. And yes, you can say we can push that into next year, and we can in some ways by restructuring money. You have to pay that at some point. So you still have to look at that and say that's each one of these injuries costs a significant amount of money. For setting aside for a moment, the hit the Ravens' playoff chances have taken from losing these players for whatever time they're out. The Ravens just having an unbelievably awful year in terms of injuries again. If we hadn't been through it before, I almost wouldn't believe this one with the quality of players lost so quickly and with the frequency they have been.
Yeah, I mean, essentially through the first 3 weeks, you're looking at basically half the starters on the team that are out, and that's a testament to the Ravens' depth that they've been able to have the amount of success that they've had so far. But also, I think we saw the limits of that in this past week and how that impacted some of the play in this game against Indianapolis.
Yeah, the offense in particular definitely had some changes made to it based on the inability to protect the quarterback. I think would be only fair to say, and we'll get to that in a little bit. This game in a lot of ways, offensively, a return to what we hoped the offense would not be. So you're riding this roller coaster where in week 2, they have one of the biggest wins they've had in a couple of years. They go in and they beat the Bengals in Cincinnati, and they take care of Burrow in the way they've taken care of Burrow in the last 4 times, really limiting him, forcing the throws underneath, setting up some good play from the cornerbacks and the safeties, as well as some decent pass rush to get after him and cause him problems. And, just a huge win, a very efficient offense in those games. In particular, the week 2 game to get 26 out of 31 series of downs, resulting in another first down or a touchdown. They've been remarkably successful in the red zone through 3 games. That's something that the Ravens haven't always done in the past. It's been a common complaint, particularly when Huntley had been in there, that they just couldn't punch it into the end zone. But now, The Ravens, I don't know if they're leading the NFL right now, but they should be because they've scored 63 points on 11 red zone trips, which is 5.7 points per trip to the red zone. And Kansas City led the NFL last year with 4.2 yards. Now, it could be Miami or somebody like that who scored a lot of points, is already ahead of them early right now. But that's an amazing pace the Ravens are on.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely that they can maintain that over the course of the season, but if you're still, even, over between 3 and 4 points per red zone, that's better than average, I think. So
yeah, they were 3.5 last year, and they were 8th in the NFL.
So, and there's a lot of improvement that can happen from last year. So I think, having some additional weapons and having a more creative offensive play calling in the red zone has been, a major reason for that. But I also think that being able to get down into the red zone is going to be a challenge at times if they don't have, some of the pieces to be able to maintain consistent drives, because the one thing that we haven't really seen from this team is explosive plays. We saw a few of them last week, but this week, week 3, it was completely missing, and that's something that's going to have to change if they want to be, a really high-end offense, I think, this season.
Great point. And that's exactly what we thought we were getting. And incredibly, the Monken offense has looked very Romanesque in these last 2 games. They've really tried to scheme the ball out quickly. Lamar has had a very short time to throw each of these 2 weeks. It's not extended play Lamar. It's get the ball out quick Lamar. And I like him having first reads that are good, but that's not been the case in all of this, and it's really shown up. We have some passing statistics we'll get to from Lamar a little bit later that we really want to delve into that in a little more depth. I guess most frustrating about this game from my perspective was the Ravens' inability to close out the game with a run.
Yeah, going back and rewatching the game a couple of times, it was just frustrating because it wasn't complete, stalemates at the line of scrimmage always, but it just seemed like, partially due to play calling and partially due to maybe, having to rely on Melvin Gordon as the guy there who doesn't have maybe the leg drive that a Gus Edwards has, or the vision that a Gus Edwards has, someone who hasn't really played a lot of football, so far this year, and he's kind of thrust into a position, and to have to lean on him in order to close it out. I'm a little confused as to why they felt so much confidence in going to him in some of those critical plays, but I think that's the traditional kind of approach is, you run the ball when it's a 4-minute offense, and he was really the only guy who was suited for that on the roster at the time.
As opposed to Drake, you're saying?
I think so. For kind of the short yardage, I think, Gordon probably fits that bill more than Drake does, but, I don't know. I mean, Drake's also newer to the offense as well. He was a recent addition. At least Gordon had the off-season work. He's been on the roster since training camp, so he has a little bit more experience in theory in the offense than Kenyon Drake would have.
Well, Drake had it early last year, of course, and he's worked with Lamar in the mesh point, so there's some things there. In running out this game, what it seemed like to me, they leaned on Lamar Jackson for most of the game in the run. It felt like they were going to have to lean on Lamar all the way, which, by the way, I am not up for at this point. I think there's, the injury risk with Lamar taking a lot of hard hits in games like this is high. He took one quarterback hit only, which is good because quarterback hits are the really bad hits. But you took 4 sacks in this game. Now, those are quarterback hits technically, but they don't usually happen as the quarterback is driving into a throw while a defender is coming in the other direction. Usually, the quarterback is in the process of turtling up to some degree when he takes a sack. So quarterback hits tend to be the worst hits the quarterback takes in the pocket. He also took some hits on the run. In those 14 runs, every time his legs are the point of contact for the tackle, I'm concerned.
Yep.
And just as much as this was supposed to be not a designed run offense, it seems like it's a designed run offense again on Sunday.
Yeah, it was definitely a big change from the first 2 weeks where the designed runs were probably able to be counted on one hand. I think we saw at least 10 in this one. or 10 runs that were designed.
Probably he had 14 total carries, so
Yeah,
that
there's a
sounds
few
about right.
scrambles. There were a few scrambles in there, but I think part of that is due to the depletion of offensive personnel. Losing Dobbins, losing Hill, Edwards being in and out of the lineup, losing
Stanley Linderbaum.
Beckham. Yeah, obviously the two offensive linemen as well. I think there's some concerns about the ability to protect and trying to use the rushing from Lamar as a way to have consistent move the chains type offense. Um, I agree with you. I didn't want to see that much of it. I think in this game it might have been like this is how we're going to win this game, which is surprising why they went away from it at the end. When in the past he has been a game closer for them. So that's something that was a little bit surprising to me. Also surprising, not using Devin Duvernay in the backfield at all. He had some effective runs last week against the Bengals, including in that last series to kind of close out the game. And not having him as an option in this at all was a little surprising to me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm beside myself over that in particular. That Duvernay was basically kept out of the offense in week 1. He only played 7 snaps, I think, on offense, and it almost felt like they were telegraphing the desire to use him against Cincinnati. Maybe keep him healthy was part of it, but definitely keep him off the film so that they didn't have any view. And then he had 3 targets, and they weren't particularly great ones in week 2, but he did drop one of them. And the other one was a contested catch right down by the goal line where he kind of only had one hand free. And then I forget where the third one was, but doesn't really matter that much. He had one opportunity in this game. So one ball was thrown his direction. And it was a ball in traffic over the middle when they needed to get some yardage at the end of regulation to set up that field goal. It wasn't an easy catch by any stretch, but he's 0 for 4 now on targets this year. I just feel like they need to scheme him into the offense right away in this next game, get him weaponized, and get him back expecting the football time after time. Build some trust with some scheme out of this. And Lamar should have lots of trust because Duvernay has been the best hands receiver the Ravens have had last year anyway. And coming into this year, starting 0 for 4 is not a good way to do it. And he had a drop, among those himself, but they've got to get him back involved.
Yeah, I agree, especially against a defense next week in the Cleveland Browns. They're looking like one of the best defenses in the NFL this season. I mean, they have a lot of really good players that they brought in, a very, very solid front seven and a good scheme, I think. So they're going to have to lean on all the weapons that they have. And hopefully, this is kind of an aberration this past week and kind of like the way the game was called. And I'd like to see something more along the lines of what we saw in week 2, hopefully moving forward. But you never know. Sometimes maybe they see something on film and they want to attack a team a certain way, and it's just the wrong decision, and they don't make the proper adjustments in the way they planned the offense in the week leading up to it. Might not have been the right approach. So we'll see what they have in store for next week. But the one thing that I think is troubling to me is, and we might get to this a little bit later, but so far the usage of Zay Flowers, I think, has been
very troubling.
Incorrect. Definitely like to get him the ball. Understand that he's a weapon with the ball in his hands, but his average depth of target needs to be deeper. Like he's also someone who can get downfield and make plays. We saw him last week with a really nice deep routes and catch. He's capable of doing that. And if you limit him to just being, 5 yards around the line of scrimmage guy, it's going to be a limiting factor.
And he wasn't even that far in this game. 3.5 was his ADOT in this game, and his long catch of the day was for 8 yards. So, that includes the yak on that play. Great that he caught 8 out of 10 balls. Actually, it's really not that great given where those balls were, and whatnot. But he was interfered with on one. We know that. We all saw that together, and that wasn't flagged. But using Flowers around the line of scrimmage as a gadget guy is always going to be a little tempting because he is so good and so elusive, forces so many missed tackles. I'm okay with doing it occasionally and showing it occasionally to keep it on film, to keep opposing defensive coordinators up at night. But the primary heavy lifting that he was brought in here to do is to take the top off the defense, be a dangerous deep receiver. And you had a play where they threw it kind of. Some people would argue whether it was into the teeth of the coverage or not, but there were two defenders in the area. There was risk of that ball being intercepted. Flowers went up and made a great catch last week on the 52-yard ball. But the point of that is that should have made it all the more necessary for the Indianapolis Colts to put safety help on for Flowers play after play this last week. But the Ravens never made him do it.
Yeah, and it's really strange when you go back and watch the film too, because you see kind of there's a void in the Colts defense over the middle of the field that they rarely attacked, and when they did, they were successful, but they just didn't seem to go after it. And that's where it can be Flowers, it can be Bateman, it can be Andrews. Likely had a nice kind of catch in the intermediate void in that cover 3, cover 4 scheme, what the Colts were doing, and they just didn't seem that they wanted to attack it with the routes that they were doing. I mean, there was a few times where there were players open and pressure got to Lamar and he wasn't able to find the receiver. But overall, it just seemed like it was a really questionable design in terms of how these routes were attacking what the Colts were doing on defense. And it's a little concerning for me because I was hoping that Monken would kind of be that offensive mind who could see what a defense was doing and kind of find the ways to attack it. And it didn't seem like there were the answers that I was expecting to see. Maybe it was the conditions. Maybe it was the offensive line having some, issues blocking for more than 2.5 seconds. But overall, I think this is a game where for a multitude of reasons they'd like to have a mulligan. But I think Monken would look at this game in retrospect and say I call it a terrible game.
Yeah, I think he very well might. And honestly, after week 2 being so good, hopefully he would be self-effacing enough to understand, or to at least accept the juxtaposition between these two efforts as being the second one not being, good at all. The big drop this week, they converted 20 out of 30 first downs into either a first down or touchdown. And that doesn't seem too bad on the surface because it's maybe about 3 points lower than the NFL average, which is right around 70%. The 67%, though, probably puts you somewhere in the 20s in the NFL. That's not where the Ravens offense needs to be. They need to be much higher than that. And they need to, frankly, with what they've invested in the offense really needs to be leading this team at this point, not the defense. Doesn't look like that's the way it is, by the way, right now. But that's what needs to happen if the Ravens are going to be very successful this year. And part of that is the ball security. The losing the football in the pocket probably had a significant impact on some of the decision to tighten up a lot of these route decisions and make Zay Flowers the check down receiver that he became in this game.
Yeah, it's been a theme with Lamar Jackson recently this season. I think he had some issues, last season as well with the ball security. It's something that I think, needs to be improved significantly. If you want to be having a comfortable feeling with, some of the willingness to kind of have longer potential plays developing, because obviously the longer Lamar's in the pocket, the longer higher chance of becoming, getting sacked. And if he's not going to be able to hold on to the ball in those situations, then that's even higher risk of, instead of just, a 5-yard sack, which, is detrimental, sack fumble, which can be potentially catastrophic. And we saw it in this game directly leading to points for the Colts. Obviously, when it's in your side of the field, even worse to have, a fumble there because it's guaranteed 3 points basically, and potentially an easy 7 for the opposing team if they have a good offense. And then it's just one of those things that it seemed like it just kind of snowballed for the Ravens in this game, where it was one fumble led to another fumble, led to another fumble, and then basically after what looked like 1.5 really fantastic drives to start the game, the offense was completely ineffective, and it was seemed like a complete kind of momentum swing. They weren't able to get anything going, and it's just one of those things where they felt like they were completely out of sync after those turnovers happened.
Yeah, I guess they had 4 consecutive drive-ending fumbles, right? Because one of the sack fumbles occurred on 3rd down, and they recovered it.
Yep.
Then they had the sack fumble where they lost it. They had the pass to Drake was the first of the 4 series where they lost it, and then the last one was the Mustafa abortion, right, where it went off his feet early, and that ended that drive. So that's about as frustrating as it can get in terms of that. And obviously, scheme is not playing a heavy role in those 4 plays. They're mostly execution plays. You can point to it as scheme if you want to point to Monken should have known about the middle 2 and should have had better scheme to get the ball out quicker, which he did the rest of the game, and we're saying we really didn't like. So if once we come to that conclusion, I think we're basically down to very significant execution penalties on those first 4 plays. McCary was beaten as bad as you'll ever see a left tackle beaten for the first sack fumble. So that was bad. He's beaten another time in the game where Lamar escaped for 14 yards, but I can't blame that part of the game on Monken, but I really didn't like the fact that everything had to turtle up, and just the way that the Ravens cover 2. Other teams haven't been finding a way to beat it, and that's really played into the Ravens' hands defensively. I think the Ravens allowed themselves to be forced into a game of offensive small ball that they shouldn't have wanted to play even with the lead. They really needed to take some shots over the top to try and get the ball out there and beat somebody deep, and they just weren't trying that. Some of those balls, by the way, they do not take a long time to get rid of the football. If you're just running a straight go route and you want to throw it to your speedy guy and hit him at about 42 to 43 yards, the time where the ball's out is somewhere between 1.9 and 2.2 seconds. So it's enough. Your line should have enough time to block for that and for you to step into that throw and make it. But I don't think the Ravens had the trust overall in the line this game.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a big part of it, and I think they took one shot the entire game. It was the first play of overtime when they got the ball, and Lamar and Bateman was running like a 7 or 9 route, and he wasn't open though. That was covered up pretty easily, and Lamar just I think he just threw it away in the general direction. But aside from that, it didn't even look like there was, any even looks downfield. I mean, maybe there was 1 or 2 plays that were designed up to be deep shots. I think there was one play action where he ended up checking it down to, I'm not sure if it was Edwards or if it was. It might have been Gordon. There was like a play action play where he checked it down to Gordon. And he got a nice little gain on that. And I think that's the way to design it up, to have your deep options, but have that check down there as an easy kind of escape if those downfield routes are covered up. I thought that's what we were expecting to see out of this offense, to kind of have options for the quarterback. If,
more spacing,
you're more spacing, have more players in routes that are functional and usable and accessible to the quarterback. And I felt like that was missing for the most part of this game.
Yeah, the big thing that I think has been missing from the Ravens offense since 2019, and we really don't say that much about it, is a true play action component to the game. And the problem is I think if you've listened to the show at all, my the way I feel about the play action boot not really working for Lamar, because all eyes are on him. Jordan Coe, by the way, your partner, thinks a little bit differently, that he can make a play outside of that edge defender, even if he's looking, but it usually takes away opportunities to throw to that deep target or the intermediate target, even if Lamar is forced to move or he feels that pressure from that backside edge defender. But even the straight play action dropbacks, in 2019, what they did is Lamar very, very rarely turned his back on the field for a straight play action. He did some with the use of pistol, and maybe that's what the Ravens need to go back to, is a little more pistol to get some of those play action looks going, because the tight ends for the Ravens that year made great use of that space. Linebackers made bad reads, and Lamar made them pay. And this, out of sidecar, the play action fakes seem to be forward-facing fakes, and this was true in 19 as well. He just made more of those plays is they seem to be forward-facing fakes where he just kind of hand checks the ball. And they are play-action plays, but they're less likely to work play-action moves. Maybe they need to do more of going all the way into the mesh point and pulling it out and throwing it. True RPO kind of stuff as opposed to doing it. Or just, faking the R component of the RPO there, meaning it's a pass play where we're going to fake it completely into the mesh. We haven't seen enough of successful true play action from Lamar really since the 19 season.
Yeah, I want to say that there was a little bit of it last week in that game where everything seemed to come so easily. There was a little bit more Lamar Jackson under center this year than what we've seen in years past. I didn't get a chance to chart it in this game, but I know last week it was about 20% of dropbacks were under center, which is a lot more than what we saw in the Greg Roman offense. It was almost entirely shotgun or pistol formation. So that does allow you to.
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and the brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First two legs of your parlay hit? Cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at a bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boosts, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
Access, the play action, a true play action play a little bit differently. But you're right, it has not really been a part of the Greg Roman Lamar Jackson offense. So I wonder if that's something that kind of takes some time to get used to as the quarterback, to familiarize yourself with, truly what that looks like, to turn your back on the defense and then, reorient yourself and identify your reads. Some quarterbacks very famously do not like to do that. Ben Roethlisberger is one, for instance, did not want to turn his back to the defense. They rarely ever used play action in Pittsburgh because of that. So it's something that I'm definitely going to be monitoring as the season moves forward. I definitely think we could, see some more RPOs. That's kind of an easier way to get into that type of, at least a little bit of a fake to get the defense kind of, off guard at least, or maybe take a step enough to open up, whether it's like a slant or some sort of quick pattern that can potentially turn into something bigger. I think there are some ways to kind of integrate that more into the offense, and hopefully that is a way to kind of like kickstart. And maybe that's something we'll see next week. They kind of didn't see that working very well in this week, so maybe they kind of make some adjustments and put in some new features.
I for one would not be of a mind that you take out every single hitch pattern to Zay Flowers where he's got a chance to beat one man to get 10 extra yards. I think those kind of risks are always good, but there's got to be some A dot to his throws. And if it's not a play action throw, then you better at least get him down the field a little bit, such that when he makes his break, he can really make somebody pay. Because in the backfield, then there's 5 guys converging on him. If he's on one sideline, and the first guy might make him miss, but he'll have to turn 180 degrees or 360 degrees to do it. He'll have to spin, and that's going to make it easier for the next guy. So it's how they're using Flowers in particular right now is probably my biggest complaint about what's going on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the other, I would say, downside to kind of the quick ball out quick, you would say to this Flowers in particular, is the rest of the offense isn't really being used, and the other weapons that are available haven't really gotten much action. I think if you watch the receivers, there's not like there's a receiver running open every single play, but a lot of times, Lamar's getting the ball quickly to Flowers, or sometimes it's Andrews, and you see Aguilar coming open across the middle. You see, Rashad Bateman, especially. I've noticed there's a lot of Rashad Bateman on longer progressing kind of routes, but he is getting open repeatedly, but he's just not getting the targets. And I don't know if that's something to do with Lamar Jackson just falling in love with Zay Flowers and his ability, and they have immediate chemistry, and that was never kind of a thing between Bateman and Lamar. But there are opportunities, I think, to kind of attack defenses more so than they're doing, and getting those quick underneath passes are really detracting from what this offense could be.
Absolutely agree, and it for an off-schedule player like Lamar, whose biggest ability is to play off schedule, I think they have to go back and take some more risk with extended plays in order to get those early reads for Lamar to have read 1, read 2, and then try and make something happen. The problem with Lamar is, though, he's always going to have that white to black, black to white, whatever you want to call it, time when he's thinking about running and also thinking about passing. And that can be a very hard thing for a quarterback to process their way through. I trust Lamar Jackson to do it like nobody else, but then it's also got to be on schedule with the other receivers. And it's oftentimes Lamar's got to scan the field. And what we have seen more than not over the past couple of years, at least, is it's read 1, read 2, Andrews, and not a host of other choices. I'm not saying that's completely different from other quarterbacks. Other quarterbacks usually have a go-to guy. Flacco had Ray Rice, certainly that was his second read or third read on a lot of plays. But Jackson is got to be, if he wants to be a great quarterback in this league in terms of passing statistics, he's going to have to be more focused on reading quickly through 1, 2, 3 before he really considers the run as being the option. I don't completely believe that he can do both at the same time and get the number of reads necessary to find that good one-on-one matchup.
Yeah, and one last thing on this, just after like last week, and I think a lot of people after the week 2 game saw this offense as kind of like, some of those worries that we had of the kind of the time it might take to integrate, Lamar Jackson and new weapons and Todd Monken together into like a well-oiled machine. We thought that, okay, we've seen it. It's capable. It's already there. Maybe it's not quite there yet. Maybe, there's still some learning curve adjustments that are happening. This is a different offense for sure than what Lamar Jackson has been used to. So kind of understanding, the progressions in this offense, being able to diagnose different coverages and know like what his read, primary read, secondary read, what it should be based off of the coverage he's seeing. That might take a little bit of time to kind of figure that out in this scheme. And I'm optimistic. Lamar Jackson is, I think, a great quarterback, and he puts in the work. And I think Todd Monken is a very good offensive mind. So I have faith that it will get there, but it might take a little bit longer than what we initially hoped.
I think that's very valid logically. I think it's completely valid logically. And I will say that as this develops, if there is additional if there's additional obstacles, if there's an additional failures before they get there. Like, let's say they go through and they lose these next two games to Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and we really hope that's obviously not the case, because it would have detrimental impact on the Ravens, period. But it will really test their relationship, because as things continue to go wrong, Monken is going to have specific desires of the way he wants to do it, and Lamar is going to have his own specific way of doing it and wanting to go back to that. And they're gonna naturally butt heads over this. So this will test the relationship these next couple of times. I have the analogous situation to this I'll give you, and I know you can relate to this. I spent a lot of time in Las Vegas, obviously lifetime, but one of the things that I always used to say about it is that you meet more weird people in a week in Las Vegas than you meet in a year back home. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you're out and gambling is a social setting and you meet more people there. But the other thing is the stress of gambling. People are losing money. They lose their minds when they lose their money, and they drink a lot while they're doing it too. And that's why nobody wants to talk about what they did in Las Vegas, right? But anyway, you see some unbelievably odd behavior at the melting pot of the craps or blackjack table, and you really don't see that at home, but it's the stress that does it. And if this relationship is going to survive, and we hope it will, and we hope that Monken and Lamar can build on trust, it has to come from success at the beginning of it. And the great thing about the relationship between Roman and Lamar and having it last as long as it does, even though that eventually soured, was that Lamar came in and was allowed to be Lamar in 2018 as Roman built an offense around him. That continued on in 2019, and they had one of the greatest offensive seasons of all time. But it was that success that made the relationship great. And then it's still soured. By 22, Lamar is probably somehow has a hand, let me say, in putting a fire Greg Roman sign outside of the complex. So really, this will test it. These next few weeks, if there is a lack of success, it will definitely test the relationship.
Yeah, so let's hope that we have a lot of success, and that this is just kind of like a little, wrinkle in time that we're going to look back on and say, every team has its issues at the beginning of the season. Hopefully, this is that game that they're at. The Ravens just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It certainly seemed that way in a lot of ways. So, I'm optimistic still. But the next 2 weeks are going to be very telling, I think. Two good defenses on the road, big games, and we'll see what happens in that pressure cooker.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll be critically important games. One thing that there's a lot of the blame for this loss is on Lamar, and the blame is definitely on the offense in general for this. And there seems to be a group of Lamar apologists, and then another group of people who want all the blame put on Lamar, and neither one of them is completely right. But there's some very telling statistics, I think, from this game that I kind of want to work through. And we'll start by the fact that the Colts did rush more numbers than you normally see a Gus Bradley team do. So they rushed 5+ on 40% of the passes, which is a very high blitz rate for Gus Bradley, known for rushing 4. And I'll give you the results by the number of pass rushers. So when they rushed, let me just make sure I have this on the right place on the sheet here. Oh, no, looking at the wrong sheet. Give me a second here. I'll pull up the correct one. Here we go. When they rushed 3, only 3 times, he threw for 7.7 yards per play. Just 3 plays for 23 yards. So not a lot to go on. When they rushed 4, he threw for 6.1 yards per play, which was still above the amount for the entire game. But they did have 2 sack fumbles among those 18 plays. And he completed most of those otherwise. Looks like there were 3 incompletes. So he was something like 13 of 15 on those throws. Make that 13 of 16. Then they rushed 7 times, 28 yards, 4.0 yards per play. So that's a lot for rushing 5. They rushed 6 times, 6 for 14 yards, 2.2 yards. So you can see the direction we're going. And they rushed 7 one time, incomplete. So you can see the more they rushed, and you rarely get this kind of a linear pattern. I'd be grouping them somehow to find this, but this is extremely smooth in terms of more rushers was bad news for Lamar in this game, which is unfortunately, some of that is on Lamar because it means that when blitzes weren't getting picked up or couldn't be picked up by the number of rushers, he was not getting the ball to the hot read as effectively as he should.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely quarterback issue for a lot of times. Sometimes it's also a scheme issue and whether or not you have that hot read. There were times, I think there's one play in particular, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but I want to say the Ravens had like 4 guys running. I don't know if they were verticals or they were like long stemming routes, and you could see 6 rushers coming, and there was nobody who picked up on it and kind of cut off their route to be like, this, I'm going to be the hot for Lamar in this situation. And I feel like the guy I was looking at was Mark Andrews, and he's has a linebacker in front of him who's turning and running to blitz the quarterback, and he's basically uncovered, and he's either not understanding that he's the guy who needs to be a hot read there, or maybe for some reason he's told not to in this case. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like you should be always, and there was nowhere for Lamar to go to, and you believe he took a sack on that one, or he had to throw it away. So sometimes that's on the receivers too to recognize what's happening. But it's it's definitely a concern. We saw it in week 1. This was an issue with when the Texans kind of had a lot of blitz pressure, and it affected the Ravens' passing game. Lamar Jackson, took a couple of sacks in those similar situations. He had to throw the ball away a few times. They were not effective when blitzed. Completely different story in week 2. And then, week 3 kind of went back to what we saw in week 1, where that was a way to kind of deter the Ravens offense significantly. Whether or not it's because it seemed like there was maybe some deception happening with those blitzes. It wasn't always, clearly like we're lining up 5 or 6 guys and we're going to come after you. Sometimes it was delayed blitzes. We saw some, stunts up front with the linebackers kind of like, stunting around and finding, kind of like a late window to come through.
I thought we saw some exceptional delayed blitzes from the Colts, and the Ravens offensive line in particular had a very hard time picking those up. They had some shifting they needed to do, and they did not get it done. We had one to Zeitler. I think there was another on Mustafa that was similar. So they definitely had a lot of problems with pickup in this game.
Yeah, so I think there is blame to go around on that. The offensive line could have protected better. The running backs, I think, could have protected better. And Lamar could have, gotten rid of the ball maybe a couple of times or avoided sacks, I think, a little bit better. But he also got out of some pressure too.
He did. He did. He ran some people out of pressure. I want to go over the ample time space, ball out quick, and pressure numbers next, because I think they tell another story as well. So he had 10 ample time and space opportunities, 7 of 9 for 97 yards, 9.7 yards per play. That's very good. It's certainly much higher than Joe Flacco typically had during his career, which was around 8 yards per play with ample time and space. It's maybe I'd like somebody to be between 9.5 and 10 would be typical, but that's fine. Lousy day for throwing the football in terms of the weather. So, that's a really good number. There were 13 ball out quick plays. Now, ball out quick plays happen for one of a couple of reasons. They happen because they're hot reads, but they happen also because they're schemed shorter passes. So a lot of the ones to Flowers are in this ball out quick category. So 13 of the 35 times he dropped back, 37%. He went 11 of 13 on those throws for 70 yards, 5.4 yards per play. Now, what's good about that is pretty much every one of those passes that he completed, which was 11 of the 13, went for at least 4 yards. So if you think that as an extension of the run game, it's really good. When you think about getting 5.4 yards per pass, it's not really what you want, but in the context of I'm going to have some ample time and space opportunities, and I'll also have some BOQ opportunities, I think it's fine that way. So extension of the run game, I don't have any problem with that. The problem was pressure. He was pressured 12 times. That's 34% of the time. By the way, the Ravens only got a little bit more pressure than that. They pressured Minshew 39% of the time. But on those 12 plays, he was 5 of 8 for, let's see, let me get this correct. 5 of 8 for 8 net yards and it was 0.7 yards per play. Okay. I thought that was 5 yards, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is not endangered. Less than 1 yard per play when pressured, and that's just not acceptable. So you can have a number of things go positive on those things, but you've got to occasionally have some throws where somebody gets away because they committed numbers to pressure, and that just didn't really happen this game. 4 sacks and 2 turnovers among those pressure events as well, making it all the worse. So the pressure is really on the offensive line more than it's on Lamar, although Lamar probably should have made a little bit more out of those situations. He did perfectly well with the ATS and BOQ throws. So I think that you really have to look at the pressures. The line has just got to give him a higher percentage of opportunities for ample time and space as opposed to pressure. Even if a difference of 2 or 3 additional throws with ample time and space would make all the difference. It probably would have made about 30 yards worth of difference in this game, and it might have prevented a turnover. It might have prevented a sack. So you would have had all the difference, probably to win the game, because hey, it was tied at the end of regulation as it was.
Just out of curiosity, for those pressure plays, so you don't include scrambles as part of the plays where he was pressured?
That is correct. So if he scrambles for positive yards, it's already been taken out of the denominator. And you're perfectly right in saying that you could add that back in. And it has been a Lamar positive over the years, is that his forced not to pass number, which includes his sacks and his scrambles, has usually been a positive number.
Mm-hmm. Oh. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there was definitely some that he was able to turn into positive plays. The one you mentioned earlier, when Makari was beat, and he somehow spun out of 3 different tacklers and turned it into a 14-yard gain. And there was one other play where I thought there was a potential for a big play, where I think it was a defensive back blitzed, and he kind of ducked it and rolled out, and he had Zay Flowers really open downfield, and he just kind of decided that it was too risky, I think, to throw. He was basically being covered by a linebacker, and he was pretty open, but maybe Lamar didn't see him, or maybe he just didn't want to put the ball at risk, and ended up, I think it's like a 1 yard gain or something on that play. It didn't really turn out to be much, but obviously, that's one of Jackson's unique characteristics is the ability to escape pressure and turn what could be a catastrophe into an amazing gain. But when he is under pressure and passing, that's when you would want to see, a little bit better success, obviously. And most quarterbacks are not going to be great when they're pressured, but under 1 yard per play is pretty brutal for the offense.
I do think Lamar is going to face a lot of pass rush. I think it needs to be a point of emphasis in how they design the offense and look at the game plan week to week, because he has not been particularly good with pressure this season so far, but in general, in his career, he's had trouble with it. And think back to the Miami game and all those 40 cover 0 looks that they gave the Ravens in one football game. Still have a hard time even thinking about that game, but it was awful. So it keeps coming up. Anyway, maybe we've beaten on Lamar enough about this. I do think I blame the offensive line a little bit more than Lamar from what I can see, but it's not like Lamar is without blame, given the inability to hold on to the football in the pocket. He did do a good job, and we got to credit him for this. When he got the ball off, he did a good job of keeping the ball safe. Didn't throw any really interception worthy balls that I can think of. And generally had, a lot of nice short completions that were positive, and some other completions with ample time and space that were further down the field, even in the 15 to 20 yard range, that were nice. They didn't really test the defense with any real long throws on this day.
Two issues.
I think you're coming back here. We had a little bit of scratchiness there, but maybe you're back now. I appreciate that. Say that one more time, if you will, for me. All right, we're working with some technical issues with Gabe. I think we'll have to move on right now. Maybe talk a little bit about snap division, because this has been an issue at running back in particular. And obviously, without Justice Hill, Gus Edwards stepped up and was the number 1 back. If you look at it, they had 72 offensive snaps. They had exactly 72 plays with a running back. You back with us, Gabe? All right, we still have some problems. But Edwards had 32 snaps for a second consecutive game. But it was Hill's snaps were effectively divided between Gordon and Drake, who had 29 and 11 snaps respectively at running back. Let's see if this is working now. Still having trouble. You got a lot of static in the background there. I'm not sure why.
I don't understand.
That's better. I think that's better. Let's test this out here. Now you're staticky again. All right, so we tried no camera. All right, we're going to try this. All right, can kind of hear you again. There's some internet issues there. We might be okay on the recording, but the problem is if I can't hear you, we can't kind of respond to each other normally. So we'll try and do this. Hopefully it'll self-correct. If not, break out and rejoin maybe, and we'll see if that works. Edwards got a touch of some sort on 11 of 32 snaps that he was in. Gordon 12 of 29. Drake 4 of 11. Sale had a pretty nominal 30 to 36 or 7% of the plays that they were in. They got the football, so there wasn't anything really very different about that. Edwards was effective running the ball. Nobody else really was other than Lamar. All right, so I have a feeling the recording is going to be fine here on your end, but I can't understand what you're saying right now. So please drop and rejoin if you can, and we'll see if it works out. All right. We talked a little bit about Devin Duvernay and how he was dropped from gadget schemes this week. 0 runs, where he had a couple big ones, 2 for 13 on the final 2 drives that they were able to get the game run out on. So that was nice. But in this game, that wasn't the case. He had 0 runs. He was talking about Devin Duvernay. He was not in the backfield for any plays this week. And just a shame to see him dropped out of the gadget plays.
I'm going to try this one more time.
Yeah, you sound good. You sound good now.
All right. Technical issues have been averted for the time being. The running back situation in this game, things kind of went downhill when Edwards went out. I think everyone watching the game would attest to that. Kenyon Drake not very effective when he touched the ball in this match. Gordon had a couple of nice runs, but overall really unable to kind of ice the game away when they needed him in that Edwards role. And then as you mentioned, Devin Duvernay didn't really get the opportunities that we've seen with him, and we saw with him last week even. And we thought in a game where you don't have any of your top running backs available to you, he might be someone that you could lean on, but turned out that wasn't the case. So it's an interesting decision. I'm thinking that maybe that's something they'll look back at and see as a missed opportunity, and use him a little bit more in coming games, especially when they're handicapped in the running back room.
Yeah, they're going to need to do something. And as early as week 5, they may get Keaton Mitchell back. Now, we really have not heard updates on Keaton Mitchell's injury, but I thought it was really touch and go whether we're going to put him on IR at all. He was going to make the roster, and then the question is, do you put him on IR and leave him out for 4 weeks when it doesn't seem like his injury is that serious, or it didn't seem at the time like it was that serious, but maybe it was. And, he's obviously still out, and the Ravens obviously need him back like nobody's business right now, because he would be a very significant additional speed weapon for this offense right now.
Yeah, and he, in the preseason, obviously was quite fun to watch. He was someone who offered that explosiveness, similar to what Justice Hill has provided as kind of a changeup. I don't know if he's someone who's going to be able to be like a feature back, given his kind of smaller size, but as someone who can come in and maybe catch a few passes, definitely be used in some of those, outside run situations, and maybe even in the slot. But I think that that's something that they'll look back at and see as a missed opportunity. And you mentioned Devin Duvernay. He outside of the box type plays, whether it's a toss to the edge, or maybe even some creative plays where you have him lining up as a receiver and doing some jet motion, that kind of thing, where he's just potentially a weapon to use. We did see, I think, him do something on social media indicating that he's looking forward to getting back and he's ready to go. So it was a little cryptic. It's hard to say for sure what that means, but with the injuries that the Ravens have had at the position, I think as soon as he is able to come off the IR, I would be surprised if he doesn't find his way back onto the active roster.
I would agree. And we certainly saw in the preseason some incredible explosiveness getting to the outside. I think we will see, that he's a weapon out of the backfield for the pass, and you can split him wide too. You can line him up in a lot of different places to do some of the things that Zay Flowers has heaped upon his plate right now. So if you want to line him up at a receiver, run him through the backfield jet motion. You want to have him be your bubble screen guy who's on the outside and take some of those passes. Fantastic, and hopefully, Flowers can do some more of what he was really brought here to do, which is take that safety away.
Yeah, having more speed on the field is always a good thing for an offense. I think we're seeing that with the way that the Dolphins are utilizing, the receivers, their running backs. If the Ravens can kind of tap into some of that with the speed that they have on their roster, I think it's only going to benefit them. And one of the players that the Dolphins had for running over 200 yards is a little tiny running back, and you don't have to be big necessarily to be effective in this league. They won the smallest wide receivers and one of the smaller running backs you'll find, and they were extremely explosive and making historical records. And I think it's something that the Ravens could lean into potentially.
Did you see how many yards the Dolphins had offensively in that game?
It was over 700.
Over 700. I think it was 735 might have been, but that's just wow. I've got to say.
I think it was an NFL record for most yards in a game, and over 350 rushing and passing, which is pretty remarkable.
Right. I mean, the all-time record for rushing in a game, I think, is only 426 because the Ravens were very close to it in the game at Cincinnati in 2020, I think, towards the end of the season. But yeah, I want to talk about a couple other things, and then we'll close out this, and we'll come back for some individual performances in part two. But the Ravens used 8 set and 4 chip blockers in this game, which is a small number. But part of that is that where the Ravens were facing extra pressure was on the interior, where linemen have to be smart about picking it up. So, a set blocker, oftentimes it can be a running back, of course, and then that can be in the middle. But if you have a set blocker on a pass play, it's an eligible receiver. It's typically a tight end who's on one edge or the other. So it might be Ricard, might be Andrews, could be anyone, but it's typically a guy on the edge. The only one who could be in the middle is usually a running back. So if you have a smaller back in there, it doesn't do you a lot of good. And it really doesn't do a lot of good if the other team is dropping people off the line of scrimmage anyway, to have extra blockers who might be looking inside to block first. So the Ravens in this game, it felt like with the way the Colts blitzed, their linemen had to pick it up better, and that the running backs were more needed as receivers to be that a hot read of some sort to get Lamar out of trouble that way, as opposed to with a block. And I think that's what we saw in Miami. They kept trying to make a heavier and heavier formations to try and get Miami blocked, and Miami kept raising them one additional pass rusher to try and get it done, and then dropping guys from the middle, of course. So,
yeah, it's hard to really help out the interior of the offensive line when they're just losing their one-on-one matchups quickly. And I know we're going to get to some of those individual performances later on, so I don't want to dwell on that too much right now, but I don't think Kenyon Drake being in there to kind of get in the way of DeForest Buckner is going to do much in terms of giving Lamar much time, and him being an available receiving option is probably much more beneficial to the offense than to being someone who's actually going to help block.
One thing I have been impressed with Monken the first few weeks of the season, and that we saw it last week 10 times, but we saw it this week 9 more times, was he used an unbalanced line of some sort. So they're running a lot, and the common thread of all those lines, and some have been with 6 and some have been with 5, is that they always want to tuck Morgan Moses in, meaning they want to have an offensive lineman outside of him. They did this in 2008 with Willie Anderson a lot, that they wanted to get him tucked as well because his mobility was kind of limited. Funny thing is, Morgan Moses has been outstanding polar, and he's been pretty mobile at making level 2 blocks as well. But they really like him tucked. They like to get his power in there and set up some blocks on the inside as well. And he's done a very good job. And the Ravens have been pretty good running out of these unbalanced formations. They got Fa'alele in the game for 4 plays this week in a 6-man line, and every one of those times it was a function of tucking Moses. And then the 5 times that they ran just unbalanced 5-man line, it was every one of those times was to the right, where McCary moved to the right of Moses on those plays. So you kind of see what they're trying to do here, and it's an interesting thing. It also, one thing it does is to potentially reduce the difficulty of some pulling situations. And we'll get into this with the offensive line, but they had a lot of trouble pulling in this game, particularly from left to right. So we'll talk a little bit about that in part 2. Gabe, anything else of the scheme nature you want to talk about while we're here before we move on?
No, I did notice the unbalanced line. I didn't notice that it was this many times in the game until you pointed that out in your notes. I had noticed it in the previous games, used a couple times very effectively. Mm-hmm. I think there was a touchdown run on one of them and another big play that came off of it. So it's good to see that as implemented in the offense.
Yeah, when they ran out the game against the Bengals, they had 6 plays to get 2 first downs because they got them a 3rd down both times. 5 unbalanced lines among those 6 plays. So that was really really getting it done. And that's if you're not going to use Ricard on every play, and it certainly would be the right move probably to use Ricard on those plays in addition to whatever lack of balance you want to run. I was very impressed with Monken's, the adaptability of scheme to do something different to run the game out against Cincinnati. Just very frustrated it didn't work against the Colts.
Yeah, and the Colts do have a pretty athletic front seven. Mm-hmm. They have fast, talented linebackers, very good athletic defensive linemen. It's a better group than I think they might have given credit for. Last year it was kind of a whole mess of a team, but they look pretty good through the first 3 weeks of the season. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to be easy. Easy win for anybody, especially when they get Anthony Richardson back at quarterback.
Right. I would agree. I completely agree with your comments about the linebackers there, that it might be the Colts' strongest position. They've had a lot of problems, frankly, in the secondary. The Colts have, and they didn't make them. The Ravens did not make them pay for that at all in this game. So unfortunate. Gabe, always a pleasure to talk football with you. Tell folks one more time about your Twitter handle, where people can talk football with you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, or it's still called X. Twitter. I think it's still called Twitter. At Gabe Fergie, and we mentioned the podcast that I co-host with Jordan Coe, Situation Room. That's also on Filmstudy Baltimore, and you can find us on Spotify. So I encourage you to give us a listen. We're out there kind of coming at you with immediate reaction after the game, and then another podcast later in the week. We're probably going to be recording tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have that available on Thursday for your listening pleasure.
All right. Outstanding. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. I want to hear from you. Another couple of guys are coming to me because they want to kind of debate a topic with each other on the show, which is a great idea, by the way. If you have somebody else who you completely disagree with about a debate, and you would like a moderator to ask some questions and hopefully not give his opinion too often, I'm happy to do it for you. Hit me up with a DM on Twitter. I'll get back to you, and we'll see if there's a good show idea there. Gabe, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks, Ken. I'm looking forward to wrapping this one up.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.